Recently, I have acquired some of the weirdest things that have ever existed in the world of Warhammer 40,000, some classic metal Zoats. These guys have a very odd claim to fame in the history of Warhammer 40,000. These are Tyranid. You wouldn't really know it to look at them, but back in the olden days of Tyranid, these guys were meant to be a subservient species to the Tyranid, and their job was to go out into the galaxy and check out some planets and see if they would be a good source of biomass for the Tyranid hive fleets. That gave these guys a somewhat believable reason to exist as Tyranid, but that lore kind of got retconned and changed into what the Gene Stealer cults are up to, and so these guys kind of just disappeared. But then, in 2020, a new Zoat miniature came out. It was an expansion for the game Blackstone Fortress, and this featured a new plastic, one of these suckers, a Zoat. And even the article that was describing this new release said the origins of the Zoats are mysterious and who knows where they actually came from. Like, these guys are weird. And I've got these miniatures and taken a look at them. They are some chewed pieces of bubblegum. It is kind of hard to see what is actually going on with these suckers. There was 4 original Zoat sculpts. I have 2 of them right here, and I really want to see if I can paint these suckers up in a way to make them look like a little something. It's definitely going to be a challenge, but I am ready for it. I got these guys from the Midwest Mini Swap. You never know what you're going to find there. Step 1 is going to be getting off the old paint. I think one of these guys has already been paint stripped. I can see some little chunks stuck in the nooks and crannies. And then this guy has a wonderful Oldhammer color scheme. Usually I would use my ultrasonic cleaner with some LA's Totally Awesome to strip minis. 90% of the time, it works every time. And it's much nicer to work with, but for these guys, I just want to blast off the old paint and get going, so I gave them a soak in some acetone. After about 40 minutes, the paint didn't look like it wanted to come off, but the acetone did turn green, so I feel like that's a good sign. I pulled the parts out of the bath and gave them a scrubbing. First with a toothbrush and then a stiffer plastic brush, and basically nothing came off. No matter how hard I scrubbed, it was only getting off a little bit of color. Physically scraping at the paint with a knife, I can still feel the paint is fully cured and hard. I don't know why nothing happened, but I threw the green guy into my ultrasonic cleaner as a Hail Mary to get the paint off. With these old minis, it can be tricky to see what's real sculpted detail, what's mold slippage, casting nubbies, and just a bad looking artifact from the molding process, so I went slowly with the rotary tool and a small grinding wheel, cleaning up any spot that I saw. Once I had it looking as good as it was gonna get, I took another look at the green guy soaking in the tub. It's been about 20 minutes in the ultrasonic cleaner and I started scrubbing, and like magic, the paint just started falling right off. I don't know why, but the LA's Totally Awesome, plus a little heat and a little vigorous shaking, totally ate right through the paint. It even knocked off some of the old green stuff keeping this guy together. Any chemists in the comments, let me know why the acetone was such a bust. Now that this guy is all clean, I got to work fixing him up too. I find grinding wheels are almost required for old white metal models. When I use an X-Acto, it captures all those little knife marks perfectly, where the grinding wheel just sands down the surfaces smoothly. To stick my guys together permanently, I drilled some 1mm holes and then stuck in a length of brass rod. There's a little bit of posability here, so I figured out what looks good and then mixed up some of my favorite epoxy, JB 6-minute quick weld. It's the only epoxy I've ever used that actually sets in 6 minutes. I mixed them up with a popsicle stick on a playing card, and then I put some of this in the pinhole and all around the tummy and then squished the 2 halves together. To get the exact poses I wanted, I had to leave a little gap in the bellies, so I'll need to rebuild them. I mixed up some Greenaput. This is 50% green stuff and 50% Milliput. This mix gives me the rubberiness of green stuff, but lets me sculpt sharper details like Milliput. I pinched off a little worm and then used a ball-ended sculpting tool to shove this stuff into the seam. Then I used a silicone brush to smooth it out. I made another little lump to make a new belly scale, and then for the surrounding tum-tum, I used my hobby knife to cut out some scales to match the surrounding model. I'm pretty sure this is exactly how the original model was sculpted too. With enough poking and prodding, I was able to make something that looked pretty darn close to perfect. I've got these guys looking about as good as they possibly can be. These are heavy lumps of metal. And I've been thinking about what to do with these figures. I have quite a collection of old school Warhammer 40,000. I have pretty close to the entire range, and I've been trying to decide what I want to do with these figures. Part of me wants to build just a classic like 1990s Warhammer collection with all on the correct bases, all based on the rule books and the codexes of that time. But another part of me kind of wants these guys to get played with even more, and to try to like bring these guys into the modern world of Warhammer. I think the move is going to be figuring out a way where these can work both as their old school counterparts, but also in modern Warhammer 40,000. The Tyranid don't have Zoats anymore in a codex, and they haven't since ever, but there are Hive Guard. Hive Guard are big chunky dudes with guns who have slow movement value, which is very similar to the Zoats, and they stand on 50mm bases in squads of 3. I've only got 2, but I can probably find one more eventually. And so I think that these guys would make a wonderful proxy as some Hive Guard, and then I can also use them in old school games of 40k. I broke out some Cobalt Keep 50mm bases and sunk in my magnets. I did like the look of that original green, so I think I want orangey brown Desert Cliff bases. I glued down some 1/4 inch cork, available from EonsOfBattle.com, and then I used my Dremel to make the surfaces uneven. Then I used my saw to carve in a channel that the Zoats peg can live in, and I poured some hot glue in the trench and then stuck down my models. I used the scraps of cork to build up some little towers, and I took some slices out of the cork to make some more steps in the rock. Then to blend out the shapes and smooth everything, I covered the base in wood filler putty and then wiped away as much as I could. These are nicer bases than any Rogue Trader model has ever stood on. I sprinkled on some small pebbles, locking them down with ultra thin superglue, and I used some sandy texture paste on the flat ground. With the bases built, I hit the models with a few coats of white primer to get them gleaming. For the first time in who knows how long, these ancient minis are ready for painting. I've got my 2 little Zoats all ready to rock and roll. They feel very correct on the 50mm bases. They fill them up nicely. And now to paint them, they're gonna want to paint retro because, I mean, these are about as old as Warhammer miniatures as you can get. But I would love for the end result to not feel old school, to feel a little bit more modern. I don't know if it's possible, but I'm gonna try. With their bright white prime bodies, I started out with a very bright green and necrotic flesh. A white prime shows off colors really well, but it does mean that every part of the mini needs to be touched by a brush. I thinned down this color and I put it all over the skin. Then I took a similar green, a few shades darker, and I also thinned this down and I glazed this over the skin, letting it pool in the recesses. Now my guys are dinosaur toy green. I took some blanchberry, a dark reddish color, and I glazed this into their fat folds and the joints to add a little bit of flesh to their scaly skin. Then I went back in with my necrotic flesh at full strength and I highlighted the top parts of their muscles and scales so that they're bright and punchy. Right now they're very bright and pastel-y, and I want the skin darker and more saturated, so I grabbed Charming Chartreuse and Algae Green, and I thinned these down, putting the darker greener Chartreuse on the bottom half and then the lighter yellower Algae on the top halves. Then I took Space Dust, a light yellow, and I edge highlighted all the scales and the tops of their muscles. All these colors together gave my Zoat skin a lot of variety in complexion. I hit the hooves or toes or whatever they've got with some black paint, and now it's time to make a decision. I wanted to go dark for the scales so I could go bright on the weapons. These guys are Tyranids, sort of. At least they have Tyranid equipment, so I want these bright and fleshy. The best flesh I've ever found is a mix of pure red with a little bit of burning ore and then white paint. This all comes together to make an almost fluorescent pink color. I sketched this in all the nooks and crannies on the flesh weapons and the flesh weapon accessories, and it's definitely a look. I really like modern Warhammer 40,000 and I really like Oldhammer, and to me, they scratch very different itches. For my Black Templar army, I don't really like to mix in the old stuff. I always want the latest and greatest, the coolest sculpts, the best poses, the crispiest details, and the old stuff just doesn't look as good in the collection. But I do also have a massive Oldhammer collection, and that is because the fun of Oldhammer comes from the collecting. Pouring over old catalogs and codexes, seeing what used to exist, and then hunting at local game stores' used shelves or at conventions trying to find some buried treasure. That's where the fun of Oldhammer comes in. And then just the experience of getting to try out something that doesn't exist anymore. These Zoats are coming along, their guns just need a little bit more work. I used some dusk red thinned down to shade the recesses of the fleshy bits, and I switched to Urban Buff, a desaturated flesh color. I didn't want a flesh with a lot of red in it, so it contrasts nicely against the pink, and I glazed this over the visible white, creating a nice gradient from flesh to pink flesh. Then I had a disgusting idea. I grabbed some red paint and a nice sharp brush, and I painted on some veins running over the larger flat sections of these flesh machines. It's a nice sickening detail that helps them read as the meat weapons I wanted. And you know what else is pink and veiny? Our website. On EonsOfBattle.com, we're all restocking our excellent hobby goodies: Gamer Grass Tufts, Great Head Studio Bits for your Space Marines, Army Painter paints, brushes, base and cork, ultra thin and ultra thick super glue, and we've got terrain. It's the best way to support us doing what we do by getting a membership. Each month, members get a credit good for any one terrain pack I've ever made or the brand new one. This July, we have created the Bocage Battlefield Terrain, a series of pieces perfect for putting together a historic landscape for games of Conflict 47, Bolt Action, or any war zone with a labyrinth of overgrown hedgerows. These pieces will funnel your infantry into tight firefights while hiding the mysterious shack. Maybe it's just a utility building, or maybe it's an improvised encampment, hiding some flesh-eating zombies kept on ice for the right moment to unleash a devastating outbreak. This set was designed by us and is available at EonsOfBattle.com. I painted the eyes with a white base coat and then yellow with a little reptilian slit eye, and my Zoats are very close, but I have an idea. I hit my minis with a matte varnish to bring all the different finishes of the paint brands I use together. I do think that they've turned out really good, but my idea of them not being retro is a little bit of a flop. I just painted what's there, and what's there is 30-year-old metal models. They are pretty neat, and I do have one idea of something fun I could try out on these suckers. It's really hard to make out their faces, and I think some space helmets would be an interesting touch. I took UV cure resin and I carefully dripped this over their exposed face. I found rotating the model helped keep the resin drop balanced in the right spot. Once I had it where I wanted, I hit it with the UV lamp, and then I did a few more layers to bulk it up. It's definitely something. It's kinda too crystal clear to be noticeable though. I took some contrast paint, Bad Moon's yellow, a very transparent yellow color, and I painted this on to tint the helmet bubbles. Then I painted some more veins over top. This must be some kind of Tyranid tech to give my Zoats the atmosphere they need and just make them look even more ugly. I painted the helmets with a coat of gloss paint to bring back some of that shine, and then they're done, and I think it's very unique. Now it's time for the bases. I glazed some watered down Vallejo earth over the bases, then dry brushed them with Barren Dune to get them a little brighter. I grabbed my Gamer Grass dry starter box. This comes with a bunch of nice desert tufts. I stuck down some dry spiky looking bushes and then some darker brown tufts. Then I filled in all the remaining open spots with some tiny 2mm beige tufts. My bases are almost perfect, but I still want to add a little realism, so I took some sandy colored pigment powder and I sprinkled it a little bit here and there to lighten up the earth and make it look more natural. Finally, I was hitting the base rims with some black. A pair of Zoats. I have never seen Zoats like these. These guys had a long life before they reached me, but now they look like this. I painted the guns pink and fleshy because these guys are technically Tyranid. So I wanted them to at least look Tyranid adjacent. I feel like the flesh weapons really show this off nicely. There were only ever 4 Zoat sculpts. These are 2 of them, and then there was one that had, I think, twin stinger pistols and another one that had a bolter. I kind of want to get my hands on another one of these long gun Zoats because I feel like that would look really good. Like this guy is the hero, and then these guys are the 2 henchmen that are kind of flanking him on either side. I'm really happy with how these guys turned out, and this is going to be the start of my retro Tyranid collection. I've got just about everything in the old metal range, and I have some other Tyranid adjacent units. I'm really excited about those guys, and I can't wait to see what they look like all painted up. Let me know in the comments below, should I work on some more out of production Tyranid, or should I tackle some of the other old hammer things in my collection? I now am the proud owner of 2 Zoats, and these guys are pretty wizard. Thanks for watching.